Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning. Welcome to Tuesday. Who brought the tacos? That's my question. Who brought the tacos? I'm thinking about them bacon tacos, you know, where they actually make the taco shells out of bacon. They weave it up and then they put it in the little things and then they cook it and then you fill it with eggs. Man, those are some tacos that I could get behind today. I'm telling you right now. Yummy. Good morning and welcome. Tuesday edition means that we're going to be diving into the weekly top three. And boy, I tell you what, today there's some interesting things going on in the weekly top three, including something that I was completely unaware about, which is some confusion that's going to be affecting us in the K-12 funding this year. A move by the state, which, well, let's just say it's going to be it's going to be real interesting. Let's just put it that way. I don't know exactly the reason why. I don't know exactly why it's happening. Maybe we can get a little more insight from Brad on this as we jump into this. But we're going to talk about the more confusion in the K-12 funding, the depth of the Alaska disconnect, and how we've got even more sources of strain for the Alaska budget coming. We'll be talking about all of those here in just a little bit with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, our normal Tuesday guest here for the weekly top three. Also joining us in hour two will be Chris Story, the man, the myth, the legend, in his own mind. He's going to come in and talk with us about some, well, I don't know what he's going to talk about, but it's always good. I always enjoy it. I hope you do as well. So Chris is going to be joining us, and we'll be talking with him about, well, some kind of good life improvement thing. So it'll be fun. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming in and joining us. Oh, it's Eskimo Libertarians in the chat room. Speaking of the chat room, don't forget you can always come out and join us in the chat on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. Any one of those three platforms is available. Why? Well, because I needed to offer something new. That's why. That's what we're gonna do. So head on over and check us out. Facebook.com/Michael Duke Show, YouTube.com/Michael Duke Show, or Twitch.tv/ yes, you guessed it, Michael Duke Show. Anyway, that's the best way to hit it. So got some interesting stories for you this morning. Just a few things that are going on around the state and around the world. I had to laugh because it's news, but is it really news? I had to laugh at this piece that was over at Alaska's news source, KTUU.com. The Alaska gas prices among the highest in the nation. And there is so much deep and biting irony in that situation. I just don't even know where to begin. But as the headline says, Alaska gas prices definitely up there. Only we have the fifth highest gas price in the country, trailing only behind California, Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii. So apparently all the West Coast nations, they're just like gluttons. They need that high gas price. I just, oof, man. Last year, gas prices in Alaska peaked at about $5.60 per gallon, which is higher than the current average of $1.30. We're paying about almost $1.30 higher, rather. We're paying about $4.33 a gallon right now for gas. Unless you're like me, in which case you have to use Supreme, in which case you're paying a lot more. I'm paying like $5 a gallon right now. Gas prices are expected to steadily increase over the remainder of this summer. So, buy low, sell high if you want to stock up on some gasoline, I guess. The Southeast Alaska has seen the highest prices, with Sitka reporting $5.18, Prince of Wales Islands reporting $4.94, Cordova at $4.94. I'm sure that there's actually higher prices up somewhere up on the North Slope or in the villages, which are not counted in this AAA report because there's no highways there, which I'm sure is what AAA is counting on. Although Sitka doesn't really have a highway either. I don't know. I know that prices in certain areas, and maybe Sean, who's up in Kotzebue, can tell us this morning, or Willie out in Quinnahock, they both listen to the show on the stream and talk in the chat room occasionally. Maybe they can tell us, but last I heard it was, $6-7 a gallon. So anyway, it's all ironic that here we sit on some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the nation. We actually refine some of our own fuel here in the state, and yet we are in the top 5 in the nation as far as gas prices go. There's some deep and bitter irony in all those situations. But we got to do it. We got to have it to live. You got to continue on. That's how you get to work, and that's how you mow your lawn, and that's how you do all the things. Unless you're one of these people who's got one of the has anybody bought an electric mower? My buddy bought an electric mower for a variety of reasons, but mostly because he said he hated lugging he's got to lug his gas mower up over a retaining wall, and there's a whole thing. And he's like, this other mower was lighter, and it was easier, and it was quieter. And so he bought an electric mower, and he's loving it. He told me and in fact, it was part of my impetus to, I bought my weed whacker died after, well, I don't know. I had it for 10 years, and that was before Terry's grandfather had it for, I don't know how many years. I got it from him originally. And it finally died, gas powered, weed whacker. So I went out and I bought a battery powered one, in part because my buddy was so hot to trot on this battery powered mower. So I wasn't ready to go full mower route. I got a gas mower for that, but I went out and bought a battery powered weed whacker. I got a DeWalt one because I got all these DeWalt tools with all the same batteries, and I was like, and it works slick. Works slick, man. I don't know. Anyway, that's a total sidebar, but I had to laugh just because it was like it's a shock to us, or it's some kind of headline news that we pay the highest gas prices in the nation. The irony is just so deep on this. I just don't even know where to begin. All right, what else we got here? Headlines for folks in the Matsu with less than 3 weeks of summer remaining and summer vacation. More importantly, the Matsu Education Association, which is the union that represents teachers in the Matsu borough, has approved an agreement with the Matsu Borough School Board. They had authorized a strike in May if no new contract could be hammered out. And of course, the Matsu has been under between the pandemic, and then you come back, and then there was the school bus driver strike, and then there was the threat of this teacher strike. Matsu parents have got to be just pulling their hair out trying to figure out what's going on. According to details obtained in Must Read Alaska, the agreement gives the teachers a 3% raise and changes terms relating to the health insurance package. The district had offered a 2% raise during the negotiation, but instead they were like, nope, we want 3. And so they got 3. The new contract was approved by over 72% of the members. And MSCA represents about 3,400 teachers and support staff who have been without a contract since last year. I hate that phraseology. They haven't been without a contract. They've been operating under the previous contract, which has an evergreen clause in it, I'm sure, that basically says this stands until a new contract is negotiated. So they've not been operating without a contract. They've just not been operating under the old contract. I know it's splitting hairs, but that's just one of the things that bothers me. Anyway, the teachers union, which is an affiliate of the NEA, is suffering from a marked decline in membership since the Janus decision. Now more than 35% of all Alaska public employees have opted out of paying the unions that represent them. So good for them. So the school board is going to vote on the agreement tomorrow at its regular meeting. School in the Matsu starts in 14 days, 2 weeks. Man, I remember when you had all of August. That would have really sucked hard if I had to go to school on my birthday. That would have really been a bummer. Finally, before we go here, if you have an email address that ends with @gci.net, well, I'm very sad for you. I'm very sad for you because GCI, in a leaked email that got out apparently ahead of time and has really made some people mad, has now announced that it will end its email service sometime middle of next year. So if you have an email address that is attached to your GCI account that you've been using for decades, I know some people have. I think my dad has got one he's been using for years. If it is got @GCI in it at the end, that's going to go away. They're going to stop doing it because it has things have changed. They said they stopped offering the GCI.net accounts 8 years ago. So there's 40,000 people that are currently have email addresses at GCI. And those 40,000 people have been with GCI obviously more than 8 years. But they said it has become more expensive and more convoluted. And with other offerings out there like Yahoo, Gmail, and Outlook and everything else, those service companies have provided much greater services and much more detailed and up to date. And it's just expensive and they don't want to do it anymore. And so people are been out of shape because they've had the GCI email addresses for, decades. Some people have had them for decades. GCI has been in existence since the mid-90s, early 90s. No, they've been in existence since 79 as a telecom company, but they started doing internet in the early 90s. So anyway, if you have a GCI address, you got about less than a year. And they said that they may be charging, what did they say, $4.99 a month? They said because of the complexity and cost of maintaining the email program, GCI will likely implement a fee later this year for customers who continue to use the email service. She said the fee will be $4.99 a month, and customers who pay it will still see the email service until mid next year. So it's ending regardless of whether you're paying or not. So so if you got everything in your life tied up to your GCI address, your bill pay, your phone stuff, and everything, you better start changing now. I've been using Gmail for 20 years, so I guess, I understand how screwed you'd be if you had to switch email services at this point. But just a heads up, if you've got a GCI email address, you probably want to pick another one right now and start that transfer. They've got a whole thing on their website about how to transfer your address books and archive your email and do everything. It's all there. So, but just the heads up, it's coming. It's coming. Awesome. All right. Out of time. Got to go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is going to be joining us here in just a hot minute. I just realized that I forgot to send him the invite thing. So I'm going to do that right now. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. I forgot to send Brad the link this morning. That was a little bummer. Good morning. Hello. Hi to everybody. That would be a good title for a podcast, says Brian. The Alaska Disconnect, Tales of Delusion. You're not wrong. Okay, that. Eskimo Libertarian says, man, if we only had refineries and could remove the Jones Act. Oh, all right. $9 in change for gas at Port Allsworth. Yeah. Paying so much for fuel in Alaska is like starving to death across the street from a McDonald's for no reason. Bacon tacos do sound good. Yes, they do. I'm sorry. I'm just going through these. I could see Brad in the green room here. I'm just going through the quotes and the comments real quick. Brad's throwing his hands up like, what? You forgot about me? I did not. You're there. I can see you. All right. Let me bring him on before he bursts a blood vessel. I know probably the stress inducing was high because I forgot to give you well, hey, how are you? I'm sorry about that. I don't know what I was thinking. I was like, I've got everything done for this morning. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm doing fine. I had a few backroom issues this morning trying to get all the hookup done.
Oh,
so your delay in getting the link to me worked out fine.
You're like in a dark alley or something. What are you doing there? I mean, this is
I don't know. I was trying to do various things. Oh shoot! I turned off the wrong thing.
You turned off the wrong thing. Got to turn that light back on. What do you know there? Okay. All right. Oh, there you go.
Oh Lord, it's a big morning here, Michael.
Okay.
I'm back in Anchorage and I'm trying to get everything working again.
No, hey, I feel you, man. No big deal. It is good. Let me go back over here. Everybody's like, I love my cordless impact driver, but I don't have the real deal battery powered. I got to tell you, I think especially because I've got the big 20 volt battery operated stuff, the big, the professional level stuff. Cause I just nothing irritates me more than tools that don't work. I think that especially those big 20 volt battery ones, those do a good job. And I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. I was ready to return this the minute that I bought it because I was afraid it wasn't going to work. And it's great. It's great. All right, let me go through here. Brad's still working on stuff.
I
Forgot,
am.
forgot to let Brad in. Put him in a hole in the ground. I swear, if I hear someone yelling, "It puts the lotion in the basket," I'm calling the troopers to save Brad. Yes, it puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again. I'm flexing. I wasn't trying to flex. I'm just saying I hate tools that don't work. So I'm willing to spend the extra $20 or whatever it is to get the higher level battery ones. I don't get the cheesy ones. Crazy chainsaw is what got me. I got one for Christmas, but she made me buy my own batteries. Ooh, ow. That's the thing. The batteries are the most expensive part. I mean, I go to buy the tool or the tool with the batteries. The difference between the tool and the tool with the batteries is like $20. And if you buy just the tool, the batteries are like $99 or $100 a piece. I'm like, no, I'll take the ones with the kit. That's how I ended up with so many batteries. Anyway, all right. Well, that's the new world. Brad is getting.
I'm getting there.
He's getting there. He's getting all squared away. All right, so we're gonna join in here. We're about 30 seconds out right now. So there we go. That's the ding. You know what that means. There we go. All right. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share, like and follow. Do all the things on YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. Let's get more people involved in the conversation. We will get it all squared away. Back with more. Here we go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's trying to break the world over there. Let's do it. Here we go right now. Welcome back to the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. I could see Brad's getting just a taste of what it's like to be me in the morning with all the technical stuff. Brad's dashing around in the background, trying to get everything all squared away. Hello, my friend. How's it? You're back in God's country and ready to go?
I'm back home, ready to go, and I need a producer now.
Yeah, you need somebody to come over and set all that stuff up for you, and everything else. It could be a challenge sometimes when you're trying to run all the stuff all at once.
Yeah, so. I mean, cameras and lights and background and everything else. Yeah. It's just
no. I mean, I used to just do a simple radio show where I was alone in a small box with a microphone, and that was it. And now it looks like I'm driving the freaking space shuttle here with lights and power and things behind me and everything else. It's it's how we transition, my friend. It's always evolution and change. All right, well, let's dive into this, Brad. We got a lot to talk about today, and some stuff that I was not even aware of. It's interesting, but first, let's start off with this is kind of a classic because Scott Goldsmith used to talk about this, the Alaska disconnect, and you're saying this recent article from Gunnar Knapp in the ADN is highlighting how that disconnect is maybe bigger than we think. Let's get into this here.
Well, Gunnar wrote a letter. Gunnar Knapp, former head of ICER, one of the economists that have talked a lot about,
which is the Institute for Socioeconomic Research at the University of Alaska Anchorage. For those of you who are just joining us and haven't been with us for years, ICER is that. Okay, go ahead.
That's right, shorthand. So Gunnar used to be the director of ICER, and is one of those economists that has built a reputation talking about Alaska fiscal policy over the decades, actually. And there was a letter to the ADN a while back talking about climate change and saying one of the benefits of climate change to Alaska would be that we would have a bunch of climate change refugees moving to Alaska, that Alaska would be a favorite spot for people moving from the lower 48 to get away from the weather. And in fact, I sometimes have described myself over the years as a humidity refugee. Before moving to Alaska, I lived in Dallas and Houston, spent a lot of time in Houston over the years, and I just finally had it with humidity. And one of the reasons that I finally moved up here was to get away from the humidity. So that letter sort of resonated with me a little bit about people moving here. But Gunner's response, I think, was an excellent one. Gunner took the opportunity of that letter to the editor to respond and say, look, yeah, it might be nice to have a bunch of people moving to Alaska, but the Alaska disconnect kicks in, and the Alaska disconnect is this analysis that Scott Goldsmith of ICER, former director of ICER, also before Gunner, Scott Goldsmith developed years ago, and said, look, people moving to Alaska might be nice, but it increases the burden on the state because they don't bring with them, or they don't contribute to the state government, the cost of state government when they come, since we don't have taxes. Since they don't contribute to the cost of state government when they come, they contribute to the cost of local government to the extent local governments have property taxes or sales taxes, but they don't contribute to the costs of state government. That it's nice to have them when they come, but they don't contribute to the cost of state government. And in fact, they increase the burden. They increase the costs of state government because they increase the need for highways. They increase the need for public services to supports the population. And the result is this disconnect between the benefit of having increased population and the cost, the unreimbursed cost of that increased population on state government. And I thought that was, it was a well-written letter by Gunner, very short, just, just puts the Alaska disconnect back in front. But it reminded me that there isn't just one Alaska disconnect. There are several Alaska disconnects. Another example is when people say, well, my piece of legislation or my proposed infrastructure project or my proposed activity is going to bring a bunch of jobs to Alaska. But those jobs don't produce revenue back to the state. They will produce employment. They'll produce, an improvement in the quality of life for the families that are employed, but they don't produce revenue back to the state. So Hammond's term for this was selective dividends. What's going on in that situation is that the state is spending money, giving a dividend, if you will, and in the current era where the marginal source of revenue is PFD cuts, we truly are giving dividends, selective dividends, to individuals to help support their jobs. An example of that that my friends don't like me pointing out, but when we have like the Hillcorp discount on oil taxes, when Hillcorp doesn't pay their full share of oil taxes, they don't pay what BP paid because Hillcorp's got a slightly different corporate structure. When we have that sort of discount or that sort of subsidy or that sort of reduction in oil taxes, people say, well, it's because jobs. Hillcorp employs people and they get jobs, but those jobs don't contribute back to the state in terms of revenue like they do in other states. I mean, in other states, it's indirect in terms of sales. In some states, it's indirect in terms of sales taxes. In other states, it's direct in terms of income taxes. But we don't have any of that here. So we have the disconnect between, yes, we want jobs. Yes, we want people employed. Yes, we want the private sector to grow through jobs. But we don't. It increases the state's burden by having additional jobs, particularly when the state has to pay for those jobs, either in terms of a state spending or in terms of reduced revenue, as we have with the oil companies. We're subsidizing those jobs. Those jobs are getting the benefit of selective dividends. There's another disconnect that, and as I say, what Gunner's letter triggered was this recollection that we have all these disconnects. There's another disconnect, particularly when we use PFD cuts to fund government. As Matt Berman from ICER has pointed out repeatedly, PFD cuts increase poverty. Because they are hugely regressive and take a huge chunk of income from lower middle and lower income Alaska families. They increase poverty. They move people from being marginally above the poverty level or perhaps more than marginally, given the size of the PFD cuts we have, marginally above the poverty level, and move them below the poverty level when we take that income away from them. Well, what does that do? What that does is increase state government costs, because we have a number of programs that trigger off then when
Right.
people move below the poverty level. So we're cutting PFDs. We're taking that income out of lower middle and lower income Alaska families. They're increasing the burden on the state, increasing state government costs. And then what's the answer to that? Well, we cut PFDs more, and we put more people into poverty. It's this death spiral.
Right.
It's the disconnect of the death spiral that we have. So what we've done in Alaska by saying, we're a no tax state, we have taxes, PFD cuts are taxes. Matt Berman's told us that time and time again. But we say we're a no tax state. But what that's really doing is creating a situation in which, as Governor Hammond said, we have selective dividends. We have a selective dividend for all the people, for the people who move up here for climate reasons, climate change refugees. We have selective dividends in that we support them with state government services, just like we support the other people, but we don't make them pay for it. Who we make pay for it is middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. We have selective dividends when we pass legislation or when we expand the state payroll, because jobs, we got to have jobs. Well, those jobs aren't paying for state government. They aren't contributing toward the cost of state government. So that money's being taken out of the PFD now in the current era. And those people are getting selective dividends. I mean, the oil companies are getting selective dividends from middle and lower income Alaska families in terms of PFD cuts. And the consequence of that is yet another disconnect, which is that we're pushing more people into poverty, increasing the cost of state government as a result of pushing people below the poverty level, and then taking more money out of the PFD and pushing more people below the poverty level. So this state has one disconnect after another, and I think it's great that Gunnar highlighted one of them.
Well, we've been, especially when Rob Myers was so good at kind of describing that disconnect between the public and the private economy. He kind of dumbed it down for us. I mean, again, Gunnar Scott Goldsmith was talking about this years ago, this disconnect, and I'm just now making that connection. I find it ironic that the article talks specifically and truthfully about the mechanism of how we are disconnected, but I also noticed that it doesn't talk about the stealth tax on Alaskans, where all the money goes straight to the government instead of to the people to begin with, which is really the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem here is that government has remained unchecked because all that money is going straight to the government first thing. I mean, it's not even passing through the people's hands. And I understand it's kind of outside the scope of that article, but that's the thing we need to remember is, first and foremost, we have a stealth tax in the form of all royalties are going directly to the state. Then we have the second tax of them taking the PFD on top of that. And it just exacerbates that disconnect. It's frustrating, but there's the key to our problem right there.
It is. It is. And the diversion of that, you correctly call it a stealth tax. The diversion of that to government, the diversion of revenues that are intended for Alaska citizens to government is the beginning of the problem. But then government spending that money without getting reimbursed for the expenditures, without those people who are benefiting from it, the selective dividendees, without those people who are benefiting from it contributing back to the cost of government, is the second half of the problem. The point here is there are a number of disconnects created in the Alaska economy by the way we've set up fiscal policy, and they have the perverse effect of growing the population without the population having to pay for the costs of the burden that they're creating on state government as a result of the growth. And we have the perverse effect of taking more and more currently we have the perverse effect of taking more from the PFD, pushing more and more people in poverty, creating more and more costs for government, which
Which
takes
is
more
that
and more from the
self-licking,
PFD.
like you said, it's that self-licking ice cream cone of creating dependency, feeding dependency, creating more dependency, then feeding that dependency, et cetera, which we've talked about in the past. All right, well, that's number one. It's a good article. I've linked it up in the chat room. Let's go on to number two. Give me a tease before we go to break.
Number two is an emerging problem on the K through 12 side. It's not the K through 12 spending issue that we've talked about ad nauseum on the show, and I've talked about in various forums. It is a new K through 12 problem that, frankly, I think is going to come back over and bite us on the current K through 12 problem we have, which is people pushing for increased K through 12 spending. The steps that the administration is taking, they began it with the Juneau ISD, and now they're expanding it to other school districts in the state. The steps the administration is taking, I think, is going to put more pressure on increasing, have the effect of putting more pressure on increasing K through 12 spending from the state. It's another one of those death spirals
Right.
that we're getting into.
Well, and this is the first time I've heard about this. I did not know the state was doing this, so we're going to get the full rundown from you here in just a moment. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We continue with the weekly top three. Number two, a full change to K-12, where the state's coming in and telling districts, no, you can't spend money outside of what we give you. And there's a reason for that. This is the problem with, I'll just say right now, the whole problem with this is government dependency. When you're depending on other monies, you can't even spend your own. That's a problem. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate Gunner's article, but the one thing that people keep forgetting, I mean, anytime anybody's hit me with that, well, we don't pay taxes in Alaska, I'll say, let me break this down for you, old school, and then we'll go back to the whole money going directly to the government and that disconnect and everything else, and they're like, well, but that's the problem. We are creating a dependency state that in turn creates more of a dependency state. And that is a death spiral in the long run. I mean, because it's unsustainable. It's the definition of unsustainable.
It is in various forms, but we don't, I mean, Rob's made the point different ways. Gunner makes the point. Matt Berman from ICER's made the point. We don't tie people to government in this state. People don't feel a responsibility towards, keeping government under control, because government provides to the top 20%. Certainly, government provides all the services that they ever want. They provide the roads, they provide infrastructure, they provide, child care now, they provide K through 12, but it doesn't cost the top 20%. It doesn't cost the decision makers and the influence leaders and the donor class. Doesn't cost them anything. So there's no tie, there's no connection between government and that class in particular that causes them to push back on government spending. They just want more and more and more of it, and that disconnect is sort of at the core, I think, of what has happened to state spending. I mean, state spending's gone out of control. It's gone out of control because we haven't had that class in particular, the donor class, pushing back on spending levels.
Right. Well, and of course, what's funny is that it seems like there's only a few of us that can see the forest through the trees on this thing. You and I have been talking about this for years. People like Scott Goldsmith, Gunnar Knapp, they've been, arguing about this. I mean, they came up originally with that whole multiple lever thing, and that the worst case scenario, the worst thing you could do, had the most adverse impact, was pulling on the PFD. And yet they continue to, I mean, again, the legislature just continues to, it's funny how they'll they'll hold these guys, the university and ICER, they hold them up as this is the bastion of what we do. And then those guys say, please don't spend more than 3.9 billion because otherwise it's unsustainable. And they all go, oh, yes. And then they immediately blow past it, right? I mean, this is what, 2014? When you and I first started talking about some of this stuff in 2014, they were like, here's the thing. You can't go over 3.9 billion. If you do, then the model says it's bad in the long run. And then like, yes, okay. And then the next year, okay, now you can't go over 4.1 billion. And they're like, yes. And then they just threw up their hands and stopped giving the recommendations because obviously nobody's paying attention to it.
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. You're spot on in terms of the legislature. People in the legislature say, "Oh, listen to ICER. ICER knows what they're doing. ICER's our economists. ICER really has a good handle on the economy." And then ICER says, "Don't spend, or if you're gonna spend, at least tax. At least make a connection between the people and the spending, so that people are pushing back on spending." And the legislature goes, we're not going to listen to them anymore. Let's find somebody else to bring in here and talk about this stuff.
Because that doesn't mesh with our philosophy of spend, which is again, totally problematic at this point. And I just don't know. I don't know how to get the point across anymore. I mean, we just keep hammering at it and they just keep going, but there's not a lot we can do at this point.
No, until the donor class, until the top 20%, which includes almost all the legislature, by the way,
right.
Until those people feel part of the burden of spending, until they feel part of the cost of spending, until they have to be connected to spending, until there's a connection between them and spending, it won't stop. Because It's just, to them, it's just take more and more and more. And to them, it's like, it's free money, right? I mean,
well, and this is a uniquely Alaska problem, right? I mean, this is the only state in the nation that does it this way. This is a completely Alaska problem, and it's gonna kill us in the long run. I mean, not literally, but fiscally, it's gonna kill us in the long run.
Yeah, when various groups bring up, Texas experts or DC experts or experts from elsewhere to talk about Alaska fiscal issues, I just sort of chuckle because no one understands the PFD. No one gets the impact of the PFD and what PFD cuts do. ICER does, but you bring up people from other states and they don't.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Socialism has its downsides, says Donna. Hey, it's true. I didn't write the Constitution. We just have to live under it, unfortunately. We're continuing now. Number 2 of the weekly top 3 is up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow. Let's get this done. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep. Continuing now, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Number 2, a whole new change to K-12 that I didn't even know was out there or coming, and it could have serious ramifications. Brad, give us the background here before you jump into it.
A good story on this issue is in the Juneau Empire, in this week's Juneau Empire. It says the headline is State Broadens Challenge of Outside the Cap Funding to All School Districts in Alaska. And this is an issue that started between the state and Juneau, but's now spread to the remainder of the state. The core of the issue is this. Juneau spends a lot of money, a lot of local money, in support of their state, in support of their K through 12 schools. They don't spend it directly in the school. The money that goes into the schools support support K through 12 directly is capped by state regulation. But they spend it on things like transportation, like sports activities, like other non-core education activities. And they've done that for a long time, and other school districts have done that for a long time. The state is starting to clamp down on that heavily and saying that those things that you've been spending on, the money you've been spending on outside of core K through 12, has to be included inside your cap. And if you're already spending up to your cap in supporting K through 12 education, local funds in support of K through 12 education, core education, you can't spend any more on these ancillary things. What the local districts have thought is outside the cap, what the state's now saying is inside the cap. And in the middle of this article, they explain the issue. According to Lori Weed, the Department of Education school finance manager, the letter to Juneau was sent because the state in recent years, and my thing just blipped, so hang on a second.
Because the state in recent years has failed federal disparity tests due to districts allocating, quote, special revenue funds, unquote, for purposes like pupil transportation. The disparity test is a little-known ruling involving areas affected by federal impact aid, which for Alaskans means proving there is less than a 25% funding difference between the highest and the lowest funded districts.
Yep. Thank you. So what's going on is the state is saying, look, the feds are including this stuff outside that you have been saying is outside the cap. The feds have been including that in their calculation of whether there's a 25% disparity between the best funded district in the state and the lowest funded district in the state. And the state has been violating that disparity test as a result of what you've been spending outside the cap. And then as a result of violating the disparity test, the federal impact aid, which is important for some bush districts, is at risk, and the federal government is at risk of withdrawing that aid in support of the bush districts that have significant federal activity in them. So or significant federal presence, ownership, other things in them. So the way the state is responding to that is saying we're going to have to clamp down on that spending that you have said, the local districts have said is outside the cap. Bring it back inside the cap. Well, the problem with that then is that's effectively a cut to the districts that have been doing that. To say to Juneau, you can no longer do that. You can no longer have this local aid that goes to these ancillary activities. Well, Juneau is saying, well, we're going to have to fund those ancillary activities in some fashion. And so we're going to have to cut spending elsewhere in order to fund those activities through other sources of revenue. The net effect of that is to create cuts or to create deficits in these school districts that have been funding outside the cap, and it's going to push them to increase state support for K through 12,
right?
To make up the difference. So we have a whole new impetus building behind increasing state support for K through 12 spending that's coming from this state action to clamp down on spending outside what the local districts have said is outside the cap. I'm not sure where this is going to end up, but we're going to see it show up in the next legislature in terms of districts like Juneau, representatives from districts like Juneau say we need to increase state spending because now you're not allowing us to use our local funds to support these things. You're saying it has to come from state spending. So, okay, increase state spending to support those activities.
Right. Well, and this is what my problem is with this. I mean, first and foremost, again, you're creating more dependency on the state and putting more pressure on that. Secondly, what really irritates me is basically you got the state coming in and telling local communities who have made a decision in their communities to fund education more than what the state mandate is. And now they're saying, no, you can't spend more of your own money on that because it's wrong. This is the problem, again, because we become dependent on the federal impact aid and other things. That dependency now creates its own barriers and hurdles on the edges and fences us into an untenable position. And that, I mean, for multiple reasons, this whole thing is just irritating to me. Donna says, how about raising the cap? How about we just raise the cap and then you can pay for your own stuff in your own communities outside of that?
Well, you could do that. The problem is you're dragged down by the lowest district. So you could raise the cap, but the lowest district might not contribute up to its cap. And as long as you have that disparity between the high end of federal the high end of what's being contributed, and the low end, if that's greater than 25%, then you've got federal impact aid at risk. So just increasing the cap doesn't solve the problem that the states identified with federal impact aid.
This is, again, the problem with government trying to pick winners and losers and saying everybody should be equally miserable, I guess, at this point. Because if a community wants to contribute, then they should be able to. If they don't, then you get what you pay for. I mean, right? That's real life. It's not government picking winners and you can't go 25% over the lowest because reasons. And they're like, but wait, we could. I mean, that it's anyway, it's crazy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's being driven. I mean, at least the administration would say right now, this is being driven by the federal impact aid rule, and putting at risk the federal impact aid, which is not an immaterial amount of support for the localities throughout the state. It's I don't know what happened to my background. It's critical that to the state, what the state's saying, it's critical that we continue to get federal impact aid. So we've got to be driven by this federal rule. And so you, Juneau, have got to stop spending outside the cap in order to keep us within the federal impact aid rules.
To keep those monies there. All right, well, let's move on to number 3. We got about 3 minutes here, Brad. So let's move on to number 3 real quick, and we'll get a take on it here. Hot take.
So number 3 is some issues that have come up with spending on the Cooper Landing bypass. Alaska Public Media's got a story on it that says with work well underway, Cooper Landing bypass costs more than double. The Peninsula Clarion has an article that says bypass projects costs jump. State looks for more funding, and they're talking about the costs of the Cooper Landing they're talking about the cost of the Cooper Landing bypass in this particular case, jumping as a result of inflation and things that they're not abandoning the project. They're finding different ways to time out the project to accommodate it. This is a problem. The impact of inflation on construction costs is a problem that's not only going to show up in Cooper Landing, it's going to show up throughout all sorts of various transportation projects that we have in the state, various infrastructure projects in the state. And it's going to become another pressure point in the legislature as they go through the budget cycle about how much to allocate to the capital budget. There's going to be a lot of pressure to say, well, we've got all these projects we need to do, so we need to increase the cost of these. We need to increase the appropriation of these projects in order to account for inflation. And ironically enough, the inflation is being driven in part, at least, by the federal government's. I mean, one of the solutions they've talked about to the Cooper Landing is, well, we'll just go get more federal aid. There's a big federal aid package out there, and we'll get more federal aid to help finance the cost. Well, the problem is part of the problem is the inflation's being caused by all this federal money that's suddenly going into infrastructure and suddenly going into transportation projects, increasing demand for materials and increasing the price of those materials, increasing demand for skilled workers and increasing the labor costs associated with these projects. So now we've got another sort of never-ending cycle. We've got increased spending, flood of increased money coming out of the federal government, which is increasing inflation costs for this particular segment of the budget. And now we're going to have to increase the state share of the budget to accommodate those increased spending or increased inflation, and it's just going to keep spiraling on.
Again, dependency begets dependency begets dependency. This is what happens when we are dependent on all that money. Now we got to dance to somebody else's tune, and that's the problem that we're seeing in all of these aspects. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Crazy stuff, folks, when you can't even spend your own money because they say no, huh? Back with more. Hour 2 dead ahead, The Michael Duke Show. I mean, that's really the heart of the problem. if you want the federal lucre, you got to do what Uncle Sugar says. And if a community, for right or for wrong, I mean, I could agree whether or not we should all vote to have higher levels of spending outside the cap, quote unquote. But if for right or for wrong, if a community decides that that's what they want to do, that should be their right. If they want all the bells and whistles and the gold-plated toilets in their kids' schools, and they all decide they should be able, and then the state to come in and say, no, you can't, because somebody else in the state is not getting the same kind of education. It's maddening. It's absolutely maddening.
Texas went through this a few decades ago. It was constitutionally driven. The Supreme Court of Texas interpreted the Constitution as saying that funding for school districts throughout the state had to be relatively equal within a certain band, and it led to all sorts of things. School districts in Texas are funded largely by property taxes, local property taxes, and so some districts, the wealthy districts, had to share a portion of their property taxes with the lower income districts in order to equalize revenue per pupil revenue throughout the state. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but this federal rule is essentially doing the same thing. It's saying that you have to keep that spending within a band if you want to continue to get the federal revenue, and it's not. The Dunleavy administration would probably say, if they're pressed on this issue, they will probably say it's not us. It's the federal government that's imposing this rule on us. To get federal aid, we have to be within this band, and it's not us that's interpreting this extra spending as being inside the cap. It's the federal government interpreting this extra spending as being inside the cap for purposes of applying the federal rule of being within this 25% band. So they're going to try to lay it off. I would bet they're going to try to lay it off on the federal government and the federal government's rules. But the effect is to put pressure on the local districts, on the wealthy local districts who have been spending outside the cap for these ancillary services, to put pressure on them to say, well, you're not going to let me spend, you're not going to let me raise it this way, then you're going to have to, the state are going to have to raise more. Or you're going to have to raise K through 12 spending in order to keep our schools at the level that we want them at. And we're going to drag the districts that aren't contributing, having that much local contribution. We're going to drag them along with us because we're going to increase state spending overall per pupil.
Which again is just the dependency begets more dependency begets more, and the comment in the article about this is Dunleavy creating a manufactured educational crisis, and but this, in the long run, they may cry about it now, but overall, what you're saying is essentially this may benefit all the school districts anyway, because they may get more money from the state in the long run because it's being forced in that way. So maybe it's a crazy like a fox thing where Dunleavy's doing this end run around it to try and force the education increase in schools. I don't even know at this point.
Well, they're gonna be very simplistic about it and say, look, it's the federal rule to get federal impact aid, which is a material part of our revenue base. And frankly, I'm going to have to go dig out exactly what that number is, because one way to avoid this is just say, okay, we'll do away with federal impact aid. We won't depend on it. But right now, federal impact aid, most people say, is a material part of the revenue base. To maintain that federal impact aid, we're going to have to impose this rule on the schools. And I think it's probably the schools that are saying, okay, good. We can use this to leverage up more statewide K through 12 spending by saying, well, Dunleavy administration is forcing us we can't fund it locally anymore. So the Dunleavy administration is essentially saying we have to fund it statewide. All we can do is live by the statewide funding. So we're going to have to increase statewide funding. And the lower school districts are saying, wow, that's good. Because we're going to get drug along with everybody else. We're going to get the benefit of that increased state spending also. Maybe it's Dunleavy, maybe it's the administration sort of, being Machiavellian about how they're doing things. I don't think so. I think it's all being driven by the federal impact aid and doing things that are being driven by what they're being told by the federal government is required in order to maintain the federal impact aid.
Well, I wish we could, if Brad was only king for a day, if I gave you the magic scepter, Brad, you could fix all this, but it's it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know what the fix to this is. I mean, it's an issue I haven't done a deep dive into yet, but it's an issue that you can just see where this is going. You can see the school district saying, if you're not going to let me fund this myself, if you're not going to let me spend this additional money myself, you're going to have to provide the additional money because these are things we need. This is what we've decided we need. We were willing to fund it. You're telling us we can't fund it by ourselves. So these are things we need. You're going to have to provide the additional money to do it. You can just see where this is going. I mean, Juneau's already started saying that.
Yeah.
And
it's social justice. It's also everybody's got to be equal. Now you could all be equally miserable, but at least you're equal. That's the important part. As long as you're equally miserable, you are in fact equal. Even if you want to pay for more, even if you want to do something more for your community, you can't do it. It's maddening. Absolutely maddening. All right. Well, Brad Keithley, thank you so much, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on board and joining us today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. Thank you for doing it. And sorry about all your tech issues. It will get better. It gets better, my friend.
It will get better. I'll consult with my producer to see if he can get it done better next time.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Folks, we're out of time. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Hour 2 dead ahead.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream, the podcasts. You'll find links to social media sites where we simulcast the radio show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And, of course, all of you out there on regular old terrestrial radio, where it's still free every day. Live around the state of Alaska on your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to it. It is the Michael Duke Show, and we are into hour 2 of the big radio broadcast. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, part of the whole 6 o'clock club gig there. If you want to be an official member of the 6 o'clock club, all you have to do is, well, get up before 7. That's pretty much it. The requirements are pretty simple. You get up before 7 and start listening to the show, you're an official member of the 6 o'clock club. And you would have heard all the discussions with Brad Keithley here about what's going on around the state. I want to talk about 2 things. Let's just finish up with what Brad was talking about. To me, the most heinous part of the top 3 this week was number 2, this K through 12 spending, this muddling of K through 12 that just blows my mind. This idea that the state is going to tell a local district that here's all the money that we give you, right, to run your schools and do everything else, but we're going to set a cap that you can't spend beyond outside of that. Now, look, if you've listened to the program for longer than 5 minutes, you know that I'm not a huge fan of overfunding of education or doing, the public education that I think is kind of out of control to begin with. But I also respect the fact that some community may decide that they want to spend more money in their community on their schools than what the state has prescribed, right? The state gives them some money and they're like, well, that's great. And we'll use all that. But we also want to fund a sports program, or we want to fund, all of our pupil transportation out beyond that. We want to do some extra things in our districts. And I would say that should be their right as a community to decide and come together. Now, if I voted against it and I didn't like it, I could move. I mean, that's kind of, I'm a huge fan of doing something like that. Like if it's onerous enough that I don't care about it, I'll move to someplace else that doesn't do that. But the problem here is that you've got the state coming down and basically saying, no soup for you, right? You can't do that. You can't do it outside the cap. Now, the reasoning behind it is obviously has to do with the federal impact aid. So because Uncle Sugar is giving us some free money, quote unquote, free money, they're saying, well, you can't do this. We're trying to pick winners and losers. We're trying to say that just because you can afford to do it, because someplace else can't afford to do it, that makes it unfair and unequitable. And this is all again about that kind of government enforced equality. Of course, the thing we know about from history, the thing we know about government enforced equality is that everyone may be equal. They're probably just equally miserable is the problem. Right? If one community says, we want to spend an extra $1 million on X, well, you can't because you're taking money from Uncle Sugar over here. And even if you are not taking money directly because the state is taking federal money, the state says, no, you can't do that. And again, because you're dependent on the state spending, on top of it, now you are beholden to them. The state is taking money from the feds and federal impact aid. They're beholden to them. It is this whole chain of dependency that basically says, well, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take it all away from you. In which case, my question then becomes, why did we just not do it all on our own to begin with? Right? Why? It is, again, I've used the word maddening now 3 times this morning, but it is maddening to think that some community has decided that they want to better their infrastructure, their schools, whatever it is that they want to better, and the state would swagger in and say, no, you can't do that because if you do that, we won't get our bite from Uncle Sugar, and we shouldn't do that. Wow is all I could say. And you'd be like, but those poor people down in where, hey, if they wanted to benefit from that, they could move to those communities that are then, well, they shouldn't have to move. Well, then you get what you pay for, right? You get what you pay for. And if you pay for nothing, then you get what you pay for. Again, historically, anytime government picks out winners and losers, you all become losers in those equations because you'll all be equal then. You'll just equally losing. This is the first time I had heard about this. And when Brad sent me this article yesterday and we were talking about it, I was like, I just couldn't even wrap my brain around the idea and the concept that somehow they'd come in and say, no, you can't do better than anybody else. We are rewarding, and in fact, not even rewarding, we are enforcing mediocrity on people. Now, I'm supposing there could be an argument about whether or not adding more money to some of these things actually makes it better. It may just make it more, more mediocre. But the idea that any community would want to add to their process, to their infrastructure, to their funding, and that the state would come in and say, you can't do better than that because somebody else won't do as good as you, and so you need to stop. Because otherwise we also won't get our money from Uncle Sam. Does that make any sense to you? I mean, maybe some of you are like, well, sure, because we don't want that, before the thing. Again, it does nothing but lead to mediocrity. Because then everybody will be at the same level of meh. instead of being able to better themselves. I don't know. I just don't know why we would stand for that. I don't know why, as a community, you would want to stand for that. If I got a letter like this that said, you can't improve your house because none of your neighbors can improve your house, I'd be like, what? I'd be like, what? You can't replant your lawn or pave your driveway because nobody else can do it, and you're making us all look bad. Or Johnny down the street feels bad because he can't have as nice a driveway as you have. I mean, it's the same kind of ideal. It's just infuriating. Every time government gets involved, it just seems to create down the road. Maybe at first it works out well, but always down the road, in the long run, it seems to just be a quagmire. In this case, a quagmire of mediocrity. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've been wrong before. I'll, be wrong. Cindy says, God forbid we should raise our kids to achieve towards greatness. I'm not a mediocrity parent, she says. I mean, again, folks, if you want, this is reason number 263 why I homeschooled all my kids, because I'm just not going to put them through that. I will do the best for them that I can without anybody telling me that I can't do something. I can't buy that. I can't do, or that I have to do something because I'm the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. That's kind of my wife laughs. We were talking about flying yesterday. One of my kids flew out of state, and we were talking about flying and everything else. And she goes, "You're interesting to travel with." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You get so angry at the TSA and all the checkpoints and everything else." And I'm like, because it's invasive and I don't like it. And I hate authority. She's like, "Yes, I know, but you've never had a problem." She goes, "I'm the one that gets searched. You don't." And I'm like, and I'm mad about that too. I mean, I have an anti-authoritarian streak that's about a mile wide, so don't take it too seriously here. What was the other story that I wanted to? Where is it? I may have closed the window. Here we go. Nope, it's right here. So before we get to Chris' story, whose topic today, I should tell you, or topic because he texted me the topic. Today's topic from Chris' story is how to get over the hill. I'm already over the hill because I'm over 50. So, I mean, I'm over the hill, right? But he's going to tell us how to get over the hill. Anyway, this is another example. Can I do it quickly? I'll do it quickly. According to the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, late last month, which would have been yesterday, in the last few days, they've issued a new general permission that allows vehicles up to 80 inches wide and up to 2,500 pounds to be used on land managed by the DNR, Division of Mining, Land and Water. This move is intended to accommodate the growth of side-by-side off-road vehicles because Alaskans, that's what we use a lot of places. And now you can use it on most state land without a specialty permit. Old restrictions, which were based on the size of a 6x6 Argo, because that's what they had, that was the highest tech back in the day when they made the regs, allowed vehicles up to 1,500 pounds, according to DNR. Those decade-old limits became obsolete as off-road vehicle manufacturers updated their designs over the years. The current model of side-by-side varies on weight depending on upgrades, yada, 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 between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds. Now it goes up to 2,500. Anyone under the old system, someone wanting to use a larger off-road vehicle had to apply for a special land use permit, which typically takes 30 days to get because it includes a public comment period as well as official agency review. And so what ended up happening? Well, the most American of things ended up happening: civil disobedience. Most owners of those large vehicles never requested the needed permit, the agency concluded, and the requirement was impossible to enforce. So, again, government being as useless as government normally is, well, we just don't. So now we're going to make rules that comply with what people are already doing anyway, which just goes to show you the civil disobedience has its I mean, it had, and maybe it was just ignorance on the part of people, or maybe it was people just like, I'll pay the fine if they catch me or find me. But they admitted it's not even enforceable. So they rewrote all these rules, and now these rules are going to apply for I don't know how many while they pursue permanent regulation change sometime in the future. So they're gonna basically put a new rule in that covers what people are already doing, which just goes to show you, why did we need that regulation in the first place? Is it really such a problem? Why do we need that regulation in the first place? If it's really such a problem and people were ignoring it anyway and they couldn't enforce it, why? How many more laws are on the books that are just like that have absolutely no way to enforce, that are ridiculous, that don't even apply the way that they used to apply? How many rules and laws are on the books, right? I'm on a serious anti-authoritarian streak this morning, but this is it. This is, again, just another prime example of why it's ridiculous to have some of these rules and regulations. And I know some of you out there are probably screaming at the TV or the radio or whatever, just go like, but again, more proof positive that through people were able to do more things through civil disobedience and just not, they had to change the law to accommodate all the people who were saying no. I love that. I just love that. All right. We're back in just a moment. Chris Story is going to be our guest. How to Get Over the Hill is going to be his topic. He continues with us in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay, you will all be equally poor, and you will like it equally. Ever. Oh, man. Let's see. Chris says he needs a driveway that just melts snow in the winter. You can't have one because your neighbors can't have one. So you're all slipping and sliding. Rick says he's glad. He said, I'm glad I'm not the only one. That I think he was talking about the TSA being irritated going through it just irritates me. Oh, I get so agitated thinking about it. Barbara says the reason I'm agitated is because I remember flying in a different era. I mean, some of that is just grumpy old man syndrome, right? Damn kids, I used to be able to walk on with anything. I could have a big cigar and just walk on the plane. I mean, you're right. Part of it is that, but part of it is just, again, that's part of the reason, is because I remember the growth of government is what really irritates me. Donna says she hates the TSA as well. And Brian says my anti-authoritarian streak is one of my most endearing qualities. So there you go. Did you see that Sherp was bought by Argo? I did not see that. If you haven't seen the Sherp, it's a big Serbian machine that is just, it's amazing. But Argo bought it. That's an excellent thing. Kathleen says some parents do an excellent job homeschooling. Many do not. Children come back to the public school system significantly behind. If parents choose to homeschool, they need to be held accountable. Kids need this protection. Well, I would argue, Kathleen, that kids need protection from a lot of things that parents do. It doesn't always happen. But I don't want the government interfering in my education of my children, whether they think I did a good job or a bad job. Who's the arbiter of that? That's my question. I think most parents who take the time to homeschool, they did it because they care more about their children's education than the average parent. They decided to do that. And I think you'll find that most kids that are homeschooled, in fact, the vast majority of them come back statistically higher than your average school kid. I mean, I think so. That's how it goes. All right. Let me get you Mr. Story on the phone line right now. Let's see if we can get him going on here. And there we go. It's working.
Good morning, Mr. Dukes. How are you?
Hello, Mr. Story. What's happening, my friend? What's going on with you?
All good in the hood. What another gorgeous day here on top of the world. How about where you are?
It's a little cloudy, it's a little misty, but it's warm, so I guess there's that. It's not like rainy and cold, but so you saying
Wow.
it's sunny down in my hometown? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, God. Blue skies and just a ribbon of pink and yellow over the mountains from this gorgeous sunrise. Now I'm just bragging, Michael. It's a gorgeous day here on top of the world.
Well, I mean,
What are you gonna do?
you're allowed to brag, my friend. That's what it's all about, for sure.
That's what the Chamber of Commerce pays me for.
Exactly. They
Don't pay
they
me.
pay you? Because I was looking for some of that sweet lucre. I mean, I was trying. How do I get in on that gig? Promote Homer and get paid. All right. So I don't know. Have you been listening to any of our discussions this morning? I mean, you
I
go ahead.
just tuned in moments ago, and there's some discussion. Were you talking about communism being all things equal?
Well, we're talking about how when government picks winners and losers, and you may have seen this in your industry, when government picks winners and losers, they're trying to enforce government enforced equality. The problem is when it's government enforced equality instead of the opportunity based equality, the market based equality. What happens is everybody ends up being equally miserable. That's kind of the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Yep.
So
true.
That's kind of where we get. All right, Chris Story, our guest. We're going to jump into this with him and dive in. How to get over the hill. He's going to give us the life coaching lesson. That's up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. And let's get into it. Let's jump in. Both feet. Do it right now. Here we go. Okay, Chris Story, the positivity guru, the man, the myth, the legend. He's a potter. He's a realtor. He's a radio show host. He's an author. He's a writer. He's a biker. He's a lover. He's a stealer. He does all kinds of stuff. He makes me feel tired just looking at his resume. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm anxious to talk about how to get over the hill, which is kind of a double entendre. You'll get it.
I'll get it. Wait, are you insinuating that I always get the double entendre? Chris of course, comes in and gives us our life coaching lesson every week. Getting over the hill. I mean, I made the joke earlier. I think you and I are both over the hill. We're both over 50, right? Isn't that always the joke? When I had my 50th birthday, everybody was sending me over the hill. Now you're old kind of thing. And I had to think, I don't feel any different than yesterday, but maybe I am over the hill. Is that what you're talking about, or something new? Give me the rundown here.
Yeah, it's all in a state of mind. I'm in the process of rereading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and I dip and dive into it a lot throughout the year. It's just always sort of at my fingertip. And as I'm preparing maybe some thoughts for on Top of the World Radio or Millionaire Minute or my Backyard Millionaire Show, something, I'm always dipping into it, in and out of it. I've got a handful of books that I go to throughout the year, but once a year, I'll start at page 1, read the introduction, and reread the entirety of the work by Napoleon Hill, written in, as you know, 1937, just coming out of the Great Depression. But it's really an amalgamation or a collection of his thoughts and ideas, starting in 1922 when he began his association with Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie by then was a billionaire class of today. He was worth 320 or 350 million by different estimations, which is equivalent to, say, probably 10 or 20 billion dollars today. And his buying power was just amazing and massive. And he had influence around the world. And he told Napoleon Hill, he inspired him to go on this trek and this journey to find out and discover and share the secret of success with as many human beings as possible, because that was one of the legacies Andrew Carnegie wanted to leave behind. And so Napoleon Hill ended up writing The Laws of Success and other books, and then blew up his life numerous times. And that's what I love. They say never meet your hero. And, you read Lifetime of Riches, which is a book about Napoleon Hill, and he really blew up several marriages in his life and used and abused a child. When I say abused, I mean monetarily. He took advantage of him during the Depression. He'd lost everything. He goes to live with his son, whom he had helped and really given a whole way of life to, because his son was born without ears, and Napoleon never gave up. I said, "You will hear," and he convinced himself and convinced his son, "You will hear." And eventually, through the aid of mechanized hearing aids, he was able to actually hear and have a more normally abled life as a result of that. But anyway, he goes to live with him, and he's abusive verbally. He's not nice. He and his new wife are basically squatting in his son's already overcrowded flat, and he ends up writing the manuscript, which became Think and Grow Rich, whilst there at the largesse of his son, essentially the graces of his son, whom he again just wasn't nice to, and ironically put the rights to his new book in his new wife's name exclusively, so as to avoid his ex-wife of ever having any monetary claim or benefit from it. Then she later divorced him and the new wife and stripped him of any rights to use Think or Grow Rich, and he could never use it. He really didn't benefit from it, except for his name. His name was out on the cover, but he didn't have the rights to it. But he was able to take and repackage that philosophy in many other books. But the point is, it isn't the man, it isn't the person. It was the work. It was the fingerprints Napoleon Hill left behind, and very simple formulas, very simple, easy to follow, almost like recipes for do these things and the cake will come out like this. And they've been time tested, and this is why they've been repeated and honored and revered for over 100 years. His work starting back in, like I say, 1920, 1922 with The Laws of Success. Culminating finally in his greatest work, this Think and Grow Rich. But it just simple things. And I think we tend to overcomplicate success in general, or we live without just a few little tips and tricks that might have otherwise saved you years or a lifetime of poverty or ill health or unhappiness. And that's what I think why we'll never really get over Hill, probably in this country. Napoleon Hill's fingerprints will probably remain with us. And here we are, like I say, over 100 years later, still talking about, and he's still got an influence in many areas of positive psychology to self-help and self-improvement and people that manage wealth and encourage other people how to manage wealth. So we may never get over the Hill, get it? But if you... I brought with me today basically Napoleon Hill's 6 simple steps to accomplish anything in life. And I thought, but a little preamble was warranted, because I think, there could almost be like this, idolatry or something relative to somebody like him. And it's not at all. He was a flawed man. He was an imperfect human being, made a lot of mistakes, ultimately, got it right and got it figured out. But I don't think the message ought to have been confused with the messenger. Just because he made a mess of his life doesn't mean that his message isn't still worth hearing.
Right, absolutely. And as you say, I mean, he's got works that came before and after that continue to just resonate. And as we say, as we've said in the past, I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. Hill just basically is delineating laws of success that have been there for years and written by others. I mean, Orson Swett Martin and more were predecessors or contemporaries to Hill that were writing basically about the same thing. Those ideas and philosophies will be with us forever as long as we listen for them and apply them.
Exactly. Like, just take, for example, the 6 simple steps. And if you got nothing else from Napoleon Hill, but these 6 simple steps, and you can apply them towards the acquisition of money, happiness, better relationships, improved relationships, a relationship if you don't have one, better health, as I say, every aspect of life throughout the whole, whatever it is you're looking to do or improve or become, these simple little things will make all the difference. And the first one is so obvious, but to fix in your mind exactly the goal you desire. Be very specific and detailed. Basically, what do you want? Or another question, who do you want to become? Who do you want in your life? How do you want to live? Be definite and be as specific as possible. Step two, create a plan and break it down into small actionable steps, eating the elephant one bite at a time. Cliche, but true. And just being able to just see what you want and then put a plan together is so obvious and so simple and rudimentary, but also can be so difficult or easy to put off and procrastinate. And third, makes it quantifiable is to write down a statement that you'll read aloud. And reading it out loud and speaking it out loud is an important part of psychology, whether really Napoleon Hill or his predecessors understood how important that was or not, or just put it into practice and said, yeah, this makes good sense. But from a psychological standpoint, and from all we know about MRI research about the brain, you truly do have the ability to, through your auditory senses, talk to yourself and talk to your subconscious and program your subconscious. So fix in your mind what you want, create a plan to get it, become it, do it. And then third, write it down and read that statement back to yourself repeatedly. And I love that he always put it, and so many other people have, but morning and night, start your day with it, end your day with it, and the rest will fill in between.
I mean, this is like going back to a comfortable old, well, a comfortable old book or a comfortable old movie. I love getting back into the roots. I think Think and Grow Rich was one of my first books that I read that was a series, that was a big, I guess, novel length. I mean, I read a lot of pamphlets. I read a lot of smaller things. I read some of the Ogmandino stuff, but I think the first deep dive book that I ever read in this regard was Think and Grow Rich. It is still one of my favorites.
Me too, which is why I read it cover to cover once a year, no matter what. And step four is what you and I are doing right here. Surround yourself with like-minded people who support your ambitions. And he always read, this actually came directly from Andrew Carnegie, to build a mastermind. Andrew Carnegie didn't know all there was to know about steel and forging. He didn't know it all, and mining and all the other things that went into his giant steel trust, but he knew the right people, surrounded himself with the right people. Have you ever had a goal or an ambition or something you want to do and you tell the wrong person, or you're surrounded by people who don't believe you can do it? I've tried it, failed. You can't. Who do you think you are? It's one of my favorite questions when I interview somebody who's incredibly successful. I love to start with that question. Who do you think you are? Because depending on the tone you put on that question or the intonation, it's like, no, seriously, who do you think you are? Tell me. I want to know who you think you are, or how dare you? And so who do you surround yourself with, and who do you put into that circle, that inner circle that is so eloquently written about in a little book called The Backyard Millionaire? You have two circles. There's an inner and an outer. Who do you allow into that inner circle, not just by proximity, but by virtue of their influence on you? Who will be surrounding you makes a huge difference. And then 5, maintain a positive mental attitude. What's funny is Napoleon Hill wrote about this very, very early. And then later, with his work with W. Clement Stone, they got into, not an argument, but they got into a disagreement when they were writing their book, The Ladder of Success, about what's more important, a definite plan or a positive mental attitude. Well, W. Clement Stone won the debate and the day, probably because he was incredibly successful and the one that was paying the bills.
Right.
And Napoleon was kind of rising from the ashes with his help. And so they finally said, okay, fine. Positive mental attitude, number 1, definite chief aim and plan, number 2, fine. But a mental attitude, how do you see yourself? How do you see the world? One of my favorite expressions, I think it was Catherine Ponder said it, or Ella Wheeler Wilcox said, 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw the mud, the other the stars. So what are you looking at? We're all in the same circumstance. What do you see? Your attitude's going to make all the difference. And 6, and finally, take immediate, persistent action. The best plan in the world left in a drawer is worthless.
Do something about it. Don't get baked in a squat. Don't get analysis paralysis of where you're just thinking about it but never actually moving on it or acting on it. That's which I think is a big problem. Those are all, I mean, those 6 steps are fantastic. And I think they've led for me in my life to a lot of great things as I've continued to examine. I want to go back though to this positive mental attitude thing for a second. So Hill was saying that chief definite purpose was number 1, and W. Clement Stone was saying that the attitude. I would have to agree. I mean, where do you fall on that debate? Where if you were arguing that, where would you fall on that debate?
With W. Clement Stone, because you can have the greatest plan and purpose and definite chief aim, have it all mapped out, and have a terrible attitude or a negative attitude or leaning away from anything positive. And I think you'll become the person that is poisoning the well for those around you, and probably lead to less success in life and or relationships.
Well,
so, I fall into the positive.
Yeah, and I would too. I would fall in the W. Clement Stone category, because again, even if I didn't have any of the other 5, if I didn't have a chief definite aim, I didn't have a plan, I didn't have any of those things, I wasn't really going to take action, but I did have a positive mental attitude, at least my life would be happier, right? I mean, at least because I could control my thoughts on circumstances and everything else. If I at least had a positive mental attitude, I could be selling shekels on the streets, or street sweeping or shoveling out stables. But if my mental attitude was good, then life is better. I mean, I think that should be almost number 1 on the list when it's all said and done.
I agree. And I think Jim Rohn put it like this, because I think a lot of people confuse motivation. People accused Zig Ziglar of just, you're one of them motivational speakers, right? And I mean, motivation doesn't last, does it? And Zig replied eloquently, no, but neither does bathing. But I suggest you do it every day. And it's the same thing. So motivation isn't necessarily just being happy,
right?
I think, or having a sort of a gleeful smile while you're mucking out the stalls of feces for whatever, I mean, it's not just about being happy in the circumstance as much as it is a positive mental attitude will lead you to where you want to go faster and more powerfully than a negative attitude. And the best of plans, again, put into the hands of somebody who has negative thinking or is constantly looking for what's not going to work. Well, unless you're building a bridge or an airplane engine, I don't think you're going to go quite as far. I do want pessimists to be engineers for sure and question everything. But I think, Jim Rohn said it, back to my point, Jim Rohn said, you can motivate an idiot, and now you have a motivated idiot. So you have to have, I think, a combination of the plan, a good plan, and education, but maintain that positive mental attitude. Maybe put that over the top of the whole thing as an umbrella, combined with faith. You must have faith, and faith is something that is acquired through practice.
Yeah. Well, I would still argue that even the dumbest person in the world with a positive mental attitude is probably still more fun to be around than the opposite of that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think it's still important, but you're right. You need all 6 things need to be working in synergy to be able to make it happen. The book is called Think and Grow Rich. That is one of the, it is one of the holds a key place in my library. He's also written The Master Key to Riches, The Laws of Success. I mean, there's just book after book after book. Napoleon Hill was an excellent writer. And like you said, you don't have to necessarily like the man for all the foibles in his life, but he did encapsulate the whole idea for many. And he did that, like you said, on Carnegie's behest. Carnegie wanted to share that. He wanted him to go out and interview. He made it possible for him to interview many, many of the most successful people in the world at that time to find out what the commonality was. And I thought that was a fascinating look at basically crowdsourcing, right? It's the crowdsourcing idea of looking at what all these people did and then putting it all down. It's interesting stuff. I really love it. So, Chris Story, final thoughts here quickly.
I guess just, because we're talking about money, obviously Think and Grow Rich, we're talking about wealth and all of that, but truly just be careful not to confuse building a fortune with building a good life. Building the good life, I think, is about who you become, not just what you get or have. But my mission is to ensure that anybody who wants more understands there's a clear path to get or become more, no matter what it is for you.
I agree. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you so much, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on board.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, hold the line. Folks, we got more coming up. Final segment, hour 2, dead ahead, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story, I think, is still with us. One final bite at the apple, so to speak. Chris, what do you recommend for folks who are listening here, either on the podcast or who are in the chat room or whatever? Because Think and Grow Rich, like I said, it was probably, I'd worked my way up to Think and Grow Rich. It was not something that I dove into right away. Now, maybe I could have, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of the other books, As a Man Thinketh and The Greatest Salesman in the World and a few others kind of gave me a jumping off point into Think and Grow Rich, that it was because it's deeper, it's heavier. Plus, it's written in the language of the day, so it makes it a little bit more difficult sometimes to grasp some of the concepts and things like that because of the way that they word things. Is it a book that you recommend people read right away, or do you have a recommended book reading list where you work your way up to Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I think about it, I too discovered it pretty early in this journey of self-improvement. And other books, as you just mentioned, As a Man Thinketh, it's a great one. Another one, which is a very short essay on all of these concepts, called Acres of Diamonds by Russell Conwell, and that's a really, really good one. Richest Man in Babylon is a parable style, which is great about more than money, the good life, and I would say putting together a good life. A little story that was narrated by a guy that I just love. It's called The Backyard Millionaire, audible version. That's great. And the cool thing about that book, The Backyard Millionaire, is that it does incorporate some thoughts of Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, all of those kinds of books that As a Man Thinketh, everything that we've just been talking about kind of incorporates all that into a cool story. But then, Think and Grow Rich, they have a modern version or an updated, annotated version with, stories of Bill Gates and, a more modern people that, not just Edisons of the world in the past, but more modern people. And I give away that book once in a while to a younger reader, just because it might resonate a little bit more. But when I give away Think and Grow Rich a lot throughout the year, and usually I'll go to the classic text. Not the leather-bound copy that I have, but I'll just give away the paperback of the original text. But if it's a younger reader, I like the more updated, modern version of that. And the same with The Richest Man in Babylon. A lot of those have been updated. But
well, I got to say, As a Man Thinketh is one of my favorite. I mean, that's really my go-to book. As a Man Thinketh by Allen, and then The Go-Getter by Brian Kine. Have you ever read that, The Go-Getter?
The Go-Getter, no, that's funny. But The Go-Giver,
no,
read that.
The Go-Getter by Brian Kine is Kyne, is a excellent short little read kind of thing. And those are the books that I kind of worked my way up to before I got to Think and Grow Rich, Master Key to Riches, some of the stuff by Orson Swett Martin. But that was the deeper end of the pool for me. Was the Napoleon Hills, etc. But a lot of those short ones, and especially I do love me some Og Mandino, Richest Man in Babylon, Greatest Salesman in the World. Those parable type stories, I really ate up. I really love those. And so, it's good stuff.
Me too.
Yeah.
And when you compared my Backyard Millionaire to, and you said, "Oh, it feels like Og Mandino," that was a huge compliment. It was one of the greatest compliments you could have given.
I mean, because again, it is a parable type story, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoy the nuggets of wisdom wrapped up in the story, and it is it's a really, really good one. So, all right, well, good news, Mr. Story. Thank you so much. And we're getting the new Jacob Mann novel is hitting Audible here the next couple days for input. So it'll be a couple weeks, and it should be out and ready to go. And so people can look forward to that as well. The new Jacob Mann book, which is available, the printed version's available now, right? And so another couple weeks we'll have the audio version up, which was a joy to read. And I'm hoping you guys enjoy it out there. Hopefully you like dark thrillers because, oof, man, so good. So good. So good.
Yeah, you performed it. I mean, I've listened back to it twice now, and it's just, but man,
yeah,
it was amazing. You performed it so well.
I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do. So, all right. Well, Chris Story, thank you so much, my friend. Good to hear from you. And we will talk to you again next week.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks so much for coming on board. Chris Story, the man from Homer, right here on the Michael Duke Show. All right. So we are getting ready to rejoin the radio here in just a moment. I don't even know if my phone, I was going to turn the phones on, but I don't know. I forgot to test my phone lines this morning to see if they're working. Do I need the phones? I don't know. Maybe we could see if anybody else out there is as anti-authoritarian as I am. Maybe that's what we should be testing out. We should test that out in the chat room here. Is I'm the only one that's anti-authoritarian, or is it everybody else? All right. Well, here we go. Jumping back into it, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow. Let's get this going on. Here we go. Okay, welcome back to the program. One final segment for today. Oof, that is the fastest 2 hours in radio, isn't it? Just vroom, away you go. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, and then I had to laugh because I hadn't tested my own phones yet. Because we were having problems with I've got a ticket into GCI to try and figure out what's going on with that. And I don't know if they've got it fixed yet or not, but I do have the phone lines open. And nope, the old number is still not working. So I will give you the new number if you want to sound off. And I guess this morning I kind of want to know, I was just talking about how I get real agitated by authority. How many of you have ever watched the movie, the Cary Grant movie, called what's it called? Mr. Lucky. Probably my favorite. I really like Cary Grant as far as the classic actors. I really love Cary Grant. In that movie, there's a whole there's a whole scene where he's driving down the road in his car and he's really agitated about something, and he comes on a bridge, and the bridge, basically there's a bunch of signs that say no left turn, no left turn, no left turn, and they keep showing the sign going by, and eventually he just rips his tie off and rips the wheel to the left and pulls a U-turn and does a left turn because it's like, you can't tell me what to do. And I so identified in that moment with that character because that's how I feel sometimes. Like, if I'm not hurting anybody, what business is it of yours that I do what I want to do? I mean, quite honestly, that's why I'm a libertarian, because I don't believe that it's anybody's right to tell somebody else what to do. If they're not hurting anybody and they're not doing anything and they're just exercising their free will, then what business is it of yours to tell people what to do? Even if maybe they're hurting themselves, even maybe if they're doing something that you believe may be detrimental to them in the long run, it's their choice, right? That's what free will is about. I mean, to go back to a more spiritual aspect, that's what free will is about. You don't have to judge people. It's not your job. And in fact, you have a prohibition on judging other people. You should let people make their own choices. And that is the problem, I think, today with well, with many things, with government, with certain, with certain sects of different religions and everything else, where everybody's judging everybody else. And I'm just like, if they're not hurting me and they're not hurting anybody else and they're making their own decisions, whether I agree with them or not, that is their free will. Now, if they ask me, I'm happy to tell them what my thoughts are on it. But I'm not going to rail on them, and I'm not going to go over to government and ask government to use its jackbooted thuggery to come in and try and enforce my will on somebody else. That's antithetical to everything I believe in. And so this whole idea, again, I just had to laugh because the look my wife gave me when she said, "You're really interesting to travel with." I've been married to this woman for 32 years. She's never said that to me. I'm like, really? What do you mean? She's like, you just get so agitated about certain things. And it never even really, it doesn't even come to fruition, but you're just agitated about it. And I'm like, it's the principle of the thing. I'm so mad. I just get so mad about that sometimes. Anyway, so am I the only one? Somebody in the chat room said, in fact, Rick said in the chat room, he said, I'm glad you're not the only one, that I'm not the only one feeling that way. He's glad that I said it because he feels the same way. But it's the same kind of thing. And it doesn't just have to be TSA. It could be any kind of governmental this thing with the four-wheelers or the side-by-sides or the bigger vehicles. Who am I hurting if I'm driving it's a 2,500 pound limit. What if I bought a Sherp? A Sherp is one of those big, right, four-wheeled, I said Serbian earlier, but it's a Ukrainian company that was making these big four-wheel drive. Those things weigh over 3,000 pounds. So what you're saying is I can drive anything, but I can't drive a Sherp. And I'm like, why? Sherp actually disturbs the ground less. It's got wider tires. It's, blah, blah, blah. So who am I hurting? And even if I was, you're cutting divots in the trail, whether I am or not. You're cutting divots in the trail. It's the earth. It's ground. It will fill in. It will. Have you ever tried to drive across the tundra? Come on. This is, and to watch these things, it's another one of those things where I'm glad they literally had to make a regulation because so many people had just basically disregarded the governmental mandate that they actually had to change the law to make it compliant. Right. It's shocking. It's shocking to me how many people, it surprises me why there aren't more people like me. But maybe you are. Maybe you are. Maybe you just think I got to keep that part quiet because I don't want to say anything. Well, if you want to call off and sound off on it here, 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864 is the number if you want to call and talk about this or tell me that I'm right or that I'm wrong. Because I think more than likely there are more people out there like me than are not. Because I think that's just human nature. I just think that society has told us basically to quell that down, and for the good of society and for the good of the commons, we should all basically do this. We must all. And to that I go, why? Why is it a benefit to everybody to hold people's free will down to do what they want? Again, the caveat, as long as they're not hurting themselves, as long as they're not hurting somebody else. If they're hurting themselves, people would say, well, they shouldn't be able to drink or do drugs or what. Hey, if they're only hurting themselves, that's not my position to judge, right? I don't have to stand in front of the maker and say, I did this and this and this. That's somebody else. So what's you should have the ability to make as many mistakes as anybody else. That's what it's all about. And unfortunately, there's do-goodery out there, professional do-goodery, who in the one hand would basically condemn government excesses for things they don't agree with. But the minute that they see something that they don't agree with, they'll we should go get the government to do something about that. Why? Somebody just said this. I think Timothy's saying this sounds like Robert Heinlein's Rational Anarchist. I mean, I'm not for anarchy. I believe that people build systems inside things, inside of societies for a reason. We all do want some of that safety and security, but do we need the nanny state on top of it? Okay, well, it's an interesting thought. We'll pick this up maybe tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Jeannie says, libertarian / anarchist. Sorry, not sorry. Is that what you are? You identify as a libertarian? I mean, I'm kind of a minarchist, I guess, in that regard. I believe that there is going to be or should be a small framework of society, right? But I believe that we've just become so dependent on that, and we've been indoctrinated. All of our children and our kids are being indoctrinated on why government is the only rational solution for most of these things. And then they get hit with these ideas like I just threw out there, and they go, gasp, how would that, it would be anarchy. Would it really? Would it really be anarchy? Because again, if you're hurting somebody else, that's a whole different thing. But if you're not hurting anybody, then why do I care? I mean, I may care about your soul. I may care about, but is it my place to tell you? Is it my place to stand against you? Is it my place to go grab government by the hand and say, mommy, 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 look at what they're doing bad over here? There's, it's a hot mess. It's a hot mess. All right. We got settle down. The show's almost over. Was I getting hot? I don't know. All right, my friends. Well, it's good to talk with you all today. Thank you so much. We're going to go out there and see if we can make a living today. And we'll be back again tomorrow with more Common Sense Anarchy Radio. It's not anarchy. Common Sense Libertarian-based free thinking radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.